let's just talk a little bit about how getting through a divorce can be extremely trying as it is, even when both parties, are on fairly good terms. But when you are dealing with someone who is, you know, high conflict and you're going through that divorce, it can go from difficult to a disaster. So, especially when you're dealing with somebody who also has unmanaged emotions and they don't know how to take responsibility and they place blame on the other person constantly.
And unfortunately, divorcing someone with a personality disorder can be one of the most daunting things you'll ever experience. A high conflict partner can make it so difficult on you. They can make it difficult on your children, attorneys, etc. Just it seems like everybody involved, gets some part of this that just is so hard to go through. They're good at being able to turn on their charm when needed, but behind the scenes, they can be emotional terrorists. And high conflict divorce really requires a strategy, not going in, just hoping for the best, but really getting strategic about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the strategy continues. Like, even
Mm-hmm.
after you end this relationship, you're going to have to continue to strategize around this person. And just to touch, you can have a high conflict divorce, high conflict relationship with anyone. They don't necessarily have to have a personality disorder, but if they do have a personality disorder, depending on what kind it is, there's a high chance that it's going to be high conflict. Um yeah, let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about some of the things you can implement that can make this a little bit easier on you. And I love that Tiffany said something just before we go get started. You need to be intentional and you need to have a plan. So these steps and these tools and the things that we're going to be talking about today, those are the things that you can actually implement. So be sure to write these down. Write down what stands out for you. Write down what you can apply to your circumstance. As always, there will be a free download. So be sure to download that too. But I think these will really help you figure out how to navigate this high conflict relationship. So the first one is go minimal contact if you can't go no contact. I mean, obviously no contact is going to be the ideal with a high conflict person. You want to create as little contact as possible with this person, but we also understand that when you have kids together or some other circumstance that prevents no contact, minimal contact is the next best thing. So communicate as little as possible. Ask yourself if this is really something that must be communicated with them. Sometimes we think, we have to send them every little thing, um, and you don't necessarily need to do that. The other part is communicate without emotion, keep it to the facts. These are people that are feeding off emotional responses. So the more factual you can leave it, the better. Eliminate face to face meetings when possible and always communicate in written form. Some examples of what we have like some of our clients are using. There's an app like Our Family Wizard, texting, emailing, whatever it may be, even when you think it could be a quick phone call and it would take care of it, it don't do it. It's just so much easier to stay written form. It can be something that you may regret, because what happens is when you do these quick phone calls, either they escalate and then you're dealing with a circumstance where one person's yelling at the other or you're both yelling and you're upset, and then it triggers these old emotions and it takes you right back to the place where you actually were in the relationship with the person. So that's one thing. But the other problem is if an issue arises, it was talked about over the phone call, it's going to be harder for you. Like if you have a court circumstance, it's easier if you have text to pull up, emails, letters, things like that, so that you don't have to deal with the he said, she said. The other part is we talk about the book of truths here. This will make it so you can easily add these type of things. Like if they're saying things, you can remind yourself of the type of person they are, because it's in written form versus when you're trying to recall what happened on a phone call. And so there's so many empowering aspects to keeping it in written form. The other part is if if it ends up in a legal situation, or if you're still in the legal part of things, if you communicate through that app, the attorney can actually be included on the app. So that's kind of cool. The other option, if you can communicate, if you're in the legality part of either going through the divorce or you're trying to figure out custodial things, make sure you're communicating through your attorney. Just keep it easy on yourself. I know that sometimes that can end up being an expensive option. So obviously you have to decide with that, but just try to keep yourself away from any face-to-face things like that. It'll just be easier on you, and keep that communication minimal.
I think when we are in these situations, we are kind of ruled by fear, right? Fear of how that person's going to respond, or how they're going to come at us, or how they're going to damage us in some way to other people. There's a lot of fear involved in that. But what I will say is, when you start to implement the boundaries, no matter how scary that is, you will start to diminish the fear. And I think if you just trust us with anything, just start small, but get those boundaries set and hold to them, and you'll see some of that fear dissipate.
Just like we talked about earlier, is they feed off emotion. Once they get an emotional response, they're winning, right? So one of the best things you can do is don't immediately respond to a phone call, text, or email. Take a beat, right? This can be really hard to do, but if you can pull back before you respond, you will be able to stay in control of the situation. Just like we talked about, removing the emotion from the situation. They want that emotional response. I can't say that over and over. I can't say that more. As soon as you give an emotional response, that person's going to continue to pester you. When you become boring, if you look up what the gray rock method is, using the gray rock method, which essentially is you acting like a rock, right? You're not exciting. They're going to leave you alone. High conflict people feed off of high emotion. So they're going to continue to bother you. So the less exciting you are, the better. So just remember to not react, respond, and only respond factually. Once you've established the boundary, then you need to maintain that boundary. If you say one thing or you start implementing one and then you adjust or change because of what they do, and you don't actually hold that boundary, then you're going to be in a tougher spot than you were before. Some things to have boundaries with might look like communication. Another one might look like topics that you're willing to discuss with this person. It might look like physical boundaries. It might look like emotional boundaries. It might look like financial boundaries, visitation boundaries. For example, like if they are allowed to come to the door or not. Are they allowed inside the house? Or do they need to stay in their car when they're dropping off the kids, etc.? If there are children involved, we do understand that these might look a little different, but you can still be intentional, and you need to listen to your intuition about what you need and what boundaries you need. Hey, thanks for listening.
Don't forget to leave us a review.
For more relationship recovery tips and tools, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and all things social media at The Relationship Recovery.
You can also watch highlights of the show over on YouTube.
If you feel like our podcast is speaking to you, check out our coaching services, courses, bundles, and more at therelationshiprecovery.com.
We'll see you next week.